The Road to Bannock, Blackwood Boys, Novella number 2, Part 1 of 2, Act 1. Night Walkers. The night was thick with silence, save for the crunch of boots on damp earth. Ego and George walked side by side, their breath curling in the chill air as they pushed forward along the muddy, frost-bitten road. Both boys carried the weight of the earlier fight with the road wardens in their silence. George clutched his heavy sling bag close to his chest, his knuckles white under the strain. Ego, taller and broader, kept his axe in hand, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows. "They'll be waiting for us," George finally ventured, his voice low. "They better be," Ego replied, his tone clipped. "Otherwise all that blood was for nothing." The moon was a sliver of silver when Ego and George finally spotted the dying embers of the campfire through the trees. They'd been walking since the fight with the road wardens, their boots squelching through mud, branches catching at their clothes. "Finally," George breathed, shifting the weight of his sling bag. The straps had carved grooves into his shoulders over the past hours. Ego held up a hand, listening. The forest was too quiet. "Wait. What is it? Listen." Ego's voice was barely a whisper. "No dogs barking. The bitch should have heard us by now." They crept forward, Ego's hand on his axe. Through the underbrush, they could see figures moving around the fire, too many figures and all wearing white robes. "Monks," George hissed. Then they heard Damien's voice, high and angry. "I told you, we're not thieves." Act 2. Monks and Mischief. Ewan crouched close to the fire, feeding it small sticks and keeping the blaze alive. Damien sat across from him, his face pale in the light, but his eyes sharp as he scanned the dark woods around them. The dogs lay nearby, their ears twitching at every sound. "Do you think they're all right?" Ewan asked, his voice betraying a tremor. "They're fine," Damien said, though he didn't sound convinced. His hand rested on the hilt of the small knife at his belt. "It's Ego, he always comes through." Before Ewan could respond, there was a rustle in the bushes. Both boys froze, their breath caught in their throats. The dogs perked up, growling low. "Get ready," Damien hissed, rising to his feet. From the darkness, 4 figures silently emerged. Hooded, draped in rough white robes, their faces pale and stern, a party of traveling monks. "What are you doing out here?" one of the monks demanded, his voice sharp. Ewan and Damien exchanged a panicked glance. "Just passing through," Ewan stammered, his hand instinctively moving to his sling bag. "Passing through," the monk repeated skeptically, his eyes narrowing. Another monk stepped forward, his hand resting on his staff. "Don't lie to us," he said. "What are you hiding?" The tension suddenly snapped like a bowstring. Damien lunged forward, shoving the nearest monk. The pups erupted into barking chaos, snapping and lunging at the robed figures. Ewan scrambled to grab a burning branch from the fire, swinging it wildly as the monks shouted and stumbled back. "Get away," Damien yelled, his voice cracking as he grappled with one of the monks. The fight that followed was more clumsy than brutal, a mess of tangled limbs, yelping dogs and flailing arms. Ewan managed to swat one monk with his burning branch before tripping over a root and landing flat on his back. The dogs, 4 pups and the great bitch, were in full voice now, circling and snapping at the monk's heels. One pup had latched onto a monk's robe and was playing tug-of-war with fierce determination. "Get off me, you little demon," the monk sputtered. "Who are you calling demon?" Damien shot back, trying to pin the man's arms. It was into this chaos that Ego stepped, his voice cutting through the night like a blade. "What in Silphira's name is happening here?" Ego stepped into the firelight, his axe gleaming in one hand, George close behind him. The monks froze, their gazes snapping to Ego's sudden appearance. "What's going on here?" Ego growled, his eyes sweeping over the scene. The monks hesitated, then backed away, muttering curses under their breath. One of them pointed a finger at Damien and Ewan. "The likes of you should not be out hiding in the woods at this time of night." Ego didn't respond, his glare and blood-stained garb enough to finally silence the monks. As the fire crackled quietly, George helped Ewan to his feet, shaking his head. "What did you two do now?" "It wasn't our fault," Damien muttered, brushing dirt from his shirt. Ego sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just sit down and let me think." "They're with us," George said, turning on the monks, pointing to Ewan and Damien. Despite George's smaller stature, something in his dark eyes made the monks take another step back. Ewan called with relief. "Ego, they just appeared and started accusing us of, because you were being suspicious," one of the younger monks protested, nursing a bite mark on his hand, "hiding in wait by the road." "We were waiting for them," Damien said indignantly. "For our brothers." The lead and oldest monk, Brother Gavin, by his introduction, began to laugh. It started as a chuckle and grew into full-bodied mirth. "Brothers, it appears this was all over nothing." The tension broke. Even the monk Damien had tackled began to smile sheepishly as he climbed to his feet. "Peace, young masters," Brother Gavin said, raising his hands. "We've clearly started off poorly. We're from the way station guest house, making a pilgrimage to the northern shrine. Perhaps we can make amends. The road is dangerous at night, and you're clearly far from home." Before Ego could respond, new voices came from the darkness. "Ego, is that you making all this noise?" Act 3. Unexpected company. Lizzie Ashworth stepped into the firelight, her red hair like flame itself. Behind her, Dan emerged, carrying a thick staff, scanning the campsite with a protector's wariness. "Lizzie?" Ego's voice rose with relief. "You made it out." "Barely," she said, but smiled. "The road wardens are thick as fleas back there. Dan practically had to carry me over the Thornwell's back wall." "I did not carry." Dan Ashworth started, but Lizzie waved him quiet. "More children?" Brother Gavin said, but his tone was amused now rather than suspicious. "Is all of Blackdown's youth taking to the roads?" "Just the smart ones," Dan said evenly. He was older than the others, nearly 15, with the solid build of a young man. "The wardens are searching every house for you boys. They'll expand outward by tomorrow. Then you'll come with us. Road wardens are rarely to be trusted." Brother Gavin decided. "The way station is a night's walk. We can offer shelter, food, and advice for your journey." The monks helped them break camp, and soon they were walking through the forest in a strange procession. 4 monks, 6 youngsters, and a pack of dogs, having received a few treats, had decided the monks were acceptable after all. Brother Marcus, still nursing his bitten hand, walked beside Ewan. "I apologize for frightening you earlier." "I wasn't frightened," Ewan said quickly, then added more honestly, "Well, maybe a little. You appeared so suddenly. Even the dogs didn't hear you." "A hazard of our calling," the monk said. "We're taught to move quietly. Useful for prayer, less so for making friends." Ahead, Lizzie had fallen into step beside Ego. "This is madness, you know," she said quietly. "Running to Bannock with nothing but the clothes on our backs." "We have skills," Ego protested, "and each other, and the dogs are valuable. We could sell one if we had to." "Never," Damien said firmly from behind them. "I'd starve first." "No one's starving," Ego assured him. "We'll find work. We'll find a way." Lizzie was quiet for a moment. "And what about home? Your parents? The burnt homes?" "They'll understand, eventually." But Ego's voice lacked conviction. Act 4. The way station haven. The way station guest house rose from the crossroads like a small castle, its stone walls glowing pale in the pre-dawn light. Brother Francis rang a bell at the gate, and soon they were ushered inside by sleepy but welcoming monks. "Young travelers." The brother porter, a round man with kind eyes, clucked over them like a mother hen. "And so many. Come, come, hot food first, then we'll sort out sleeping arrangements." The great hall was warm and smelled of fresh bread. As they ate, Brother Gavin spoke with the porter in low tones. Finally, the porter nodded and approached their table. "Brother Gavin has explained your situation," he said diplomatically. "You're welcome here for a day or two." He paused for a moment, looking up at Brother Gavin cautiously. "While you prepare for your journey, we can offer the loft in the barn, with plenty of bedding, supplies and advice, though I should warn you, the road to Bannock is not easy." "We're not afraid of hard work," Dan said firmly. "I will join Bannock's City Watch. I've trained for it." Ego smirked at Dan's bravado. The porter brightened. "Ah, a worthy calling. I can write you a letter of introduction to the brother attached to the City Watch. He's a good man. He can introduce you to the recruitment sergeant." As the day wore on and they rested, cleaned themselves, and repaired their gear, Lizzie grew quieter. That evening she found Ego in the stable, watching Damien seeing to the dogs. I can't do this, she said quietly. Ego looked up, startled. What? The road. Bannock. I thought I could, but she gestured at the monks going about their evening prayers. They've been telling me what it's really like. The lower city, the dangers, the thieves. I'm not ready for that. You're one of the bravest people I know, Ego protested. There's a difference between brave and foolish. She touched his arm. I'll go back. Make sure your family know you're safe. Maybe send supplies when I can. Lizzie, please, we need you. Ego's voice was raw. I need you. She smiled sadly. You need to do this without me pulling you back. And I need to be somewhere I can actually help, not just another mouth to feed. They argued quietly, but eventually Ego had to accept her decision. The next morning, she left with a small merchant caravan heading back toward Blackdown, promising to send word when she could. Dan, however, remained. My path's forward, he said simply. Besides, someone needs to keep you pups from getting into too much trouble. Ego just shook his head. Act 5, preparing for the road. The monks were generous with their aid. They provided the basics for the boys to travel on the road to Bannock. The road wardens have no authority within Bannock's walls and generally ignored in the lower city. Brother Gavin explained as they studied the map. But that doesn't mean you're safe, just safe from them. The city has plenty of its own dangers. The lower city especially, another monk added. Stay together, don't flash coin or anything valuable, and those dogs. He shook his head. They're magnificent, but they'll draw attention. We'll manage, Ego said firmly. Brother Marcus, his hand now bandaged, pulled Ewan aside. You've quick reflexes, boy. Ever considered training them properly? Training them how? Ewan asked, curious. The monk smiled. There's a school in Bannock, the Street of Gulls. They teach acrobatics, climbing, balance. Useful skills for a small, quick lad. Tell them Brother Marcus sent you. As they prepared to leave, each boy spoke privately of their hopes and fears. I'll find work, Ego told Dan. There is always work for a strong back. I will build something of my own. I will stick to what I know. I want to matter, Ewan confided to Brother Marcus, not just be the small one who fetches things and gets in the way. I need answers, George said quietly to the porter, about what I am, why things happen around me. The dogs need space to run, Damien worried, and I hope my family understands. Dan listened to them all, his expression thoughtful. You're all looking for something different. You need a clear plan. He observed, you should all come with me to join the City Watch. They pay well and wear dark green cloaks made of silk from across the seas. The boys shook their heads and just ignored him. Act 6, first night on the road. They left the way station with the monks' blessings, joining the steady stream of traffic on the Forges Road. Dan took point, seeking to take the lead, while Ego brought up the rear with an eye for real trouble. As they walked, they talked about what awaited them. Buildings that touch the sky, Damien said wonderingly. Do you think it's true? The Undercity is real, Dan confirmed. Old streets built over, tunnels and chambers. Some people live their whole lives down there, never seeing sun. Sounds awful, Ewan said. Sounds like a good place to hide, George countered. They made good time that first day, but as evening approached, they faced their first real decision. Ahead squatted a rough roadhouse, light and noise spilling from its windows. We could stay there, Ewan suggested hopefully. Real beds? Dan shook his head. Listen. They could hear it now, shouting, breaking glass, raucous laughter, no place for young boys. We camp, Ego decided, looking around at the campsites filled with travelers' carts and tents. But I want to have a look, see if I can get some real food, see what kind of people use these roads. While the others set up camp, Ego set off to the roadhouse and to see about a bowl of stew. He met a carter and his boys as he walked towards the roadhouse. The man seemed kind and was surprised that Ego and his brothers were on the road alone. Later, while waiting for his bowl on the roadhouse's terrace, he watched as a fight brewed between two men at a card table. After a few minutes, the two drunks stumbled outside, their fists flying, as the crowd egged them on. Ego had seen plenty of fights and more than a few drunks rolling in the dirt. But it was the three figures moving through the distracted crowd, lifting purses and pouches, that opened his eyes to the world beyond Blackdown. Thieves, Ego murmured to himself. Working together. Organized. The monks were right, Ego thought to himself, returning to camp. The road has its own dangers. The sun had not yet cracked the horizon when footsteps approached the boys' camp. The dogs growled warnings. "Easy there," a gravelly voice called. "Just a fellow traveller seeking company." Act 8, the carter's offer. Tyne Stonewall was weathered but well-dressed for a carter, his sons Colin and Malik flanking him like guards. His eyes swept over their camp, taking in everything. "Ego, these are your brothers," he observed, "and you are all headed to Bannock?" Ego nodded, a bit surprised at the early morning visit from the carter he had met the previous evening. Tyne chuckled. "Here it is. I'm hauling a full load of goods that way myself. Tell you what, help with the carts, I'll feed you. The road's safer in numbers." "What kind of goods?" George asked quietly. "This and that," Tyne said vaguely, "nothing that concerns boys who know enough to mind their own business." They agreed to travel together, at least for a while. The following days fell into a rhythm, walking beside the carts, helping when wheels got stuck, sharing meals around the fire. Colin and Malik were rough but fair, treating the boys like younger brothers. "You handle those dogs well," Colin told Damien. "Ever think of selling one?" "Never," Damien said flatly. "Just asking," Colin said, hands raised in peace. "Their beauties is all." But it was when two carts broke at a river ford that everything began to change. Act 8, the Riverside Crisis. Within sight of Riverside town, the river was swollen with spring runoff, brown water churning around the rocks. Tyne had insisted they could make it across the ford, and they did not need the bridge just upriver. "Done it 100 times. It will save us the bridge toll, which is highway robbery," he'd said. But the weight of the loaded carts and the soft riverbed proved him wrong. Crack! The sound of splintering wood cut through the rushing water. The lead cart lurched sideways, its wheel folding under like a broken leg. "Hold it," Tyne roared. But it was too late. The second cart, trying to stop, snapped its own wheel on a submerged rock. Now both carts sat crooked in the middle of the ford, water rising around their beds. Everyone scrambled to unload the cargo before it was ruined. Boxes and bundles passed hand to hand in a desperate chain to the shore. "Worthless, worm-eaten wheels," Tyne cursed, kicking at the mud. His face was red with more than exertion. "Colin, check the damage." Colin waded around the carts, shaking his head. "Both wheels are done for, Pa. Need a right and a good one." Tyne's eyes swept over his helpers, settling on Ewan, George, and Damien. "You three. There's a town just up the river. Riverside. Find a wheelwright. Don't come back without one." "What about—" Damien started, glancing at the dogs. "Leave them," Tyne said curtly. "Ego and your soldier friend can watch them. Go." Dan stepped forward. "I should go with them." "I need you here," Tyne said, and something in his voice made it clear this wasn't a request. "Strong backs to guard what we've salvaged. Go on, boys. Daylight's wasting." Act 9, the streets of Riverside. Riverside was larger than Blackdown, but had a meaner feel to it. The streets were narrow and muddy, buildings leaning against each other like drunks. The smell of sewage made Damien wrinkle his nose. "Stay close," George murmured, his dark eyes scanning the crowds, firmly gripping his new axe. They'd barely gone 2 streets when trouble found them. A group of boys, maybe a year or 2 older, detached from a doorway and spread across their path. "Well, well," the leader said, a lanky youth with a scar through his eyebrow. "Country boys by the look. Lost." "We're looking for a wheelwright," Ewan said, trying to sound confident. "Cart trouble." "Wheelwright?" The scarred boy grinned, showing yellowed teeth. "That'll cost you. Information isn't free in Riverside." "We don't have money," Damien said quickly. "Then maybe we take something else," another boy suggested, eyeing their bags. "Those are nice boots, country boy." George stepped forward slightly, and something shifted in the air. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet but carried an edge that made the gang of boys step back. "We're not alone. We have come with the Stonewall caravan." The group of boys was slightly set back by George's confidence. Carters don't like delays, or the people who cause them. George led the way past the group of boys with axe out in one hand. The small gang parted and they made their way to the Cartwright Street. They stopped at several shops on the street, but none would talk to a group of young boys. Eventually, an assistant from one stall came out after they left and hailed them. "Try Old Shul's place instead. Down the far end of this road, sign of the broken wheel." They moved on quickly. Damien muttering, "That could have gone worse." "It still might," George said, glancing back to see the gang following at a distance. "Let's find this right and get out of here." Act 10, Shuel's Bargain. By the time they found Shuel's place under the sign of a broken wheel, they were frustrated and footsore. The shop was a chaos of rust and possibility. Wheels hung from rafters, tools covered every surface, and in the corners were piles of what looked like old junk. Shuel himself was ancient, bent nearly double, his fingers stained black with years of grease and grime. He squinted at them through one good eye. "Wheelwright?" he wheezed. "Aye, I might be. Depends on what's in it for old Shuel." "Tyne will pay," Ewan stated flatly. "For good work, that is." "Good work?" Shuel cackled, but his good eye was sharp, calculating. "Still, might be something. You watch my shop while I'm gone, I'll see about these carts." "Watch it from what?" George asked suspiciously. "Thieves, mostly. My daughter usually does it, but she's at market." He gestured at the piles of scrap. "Don't touch anything, some of it bites." After Shuel gathered his tools and left, Ewan couldn't resist poking around. In one corner, he found leather armor, 2 jacks and a pair of greaves, scarred but serviceable. "Look at these," he breathed, holding them up. "Still good." "Put those down," Damien hissed. He said don't touch. But it was too late. The shop door banged open and a middle-aged woman strode in. She had Shuel's sharp features, but on her they looked fierce rather than crafty. "And what do you think you're doing?" she demanded, hands on her hips. "We're watching the shop," Ewan said, still clutching the pair of leather jacks. "Your father is a fool who'd trust his shop to puppies," she finished. "Put that down before you hurt yourself." "It's just an old jack," Ewan protested. She laughed. "Just a jack. That jack belonged to Kedrick the Bold. He died wearing it, full of crossbow bolts. Still has patched holes, see?" She pointed to patches in the leather. "Father thinks it's cursed. Keeps it to scare off thieves." "Does it work?" George asked. She grinned. "You're the first ones brave enough to touch it in my lifetime." They spent the afternoon with her, Merith was her name, learning more about Riverside's dangers and opportunities than they'd expected. She was sharp-tongued but not unkind, and by the time Shuel returned, they'd almost forgotten to be worried. "Fixed," the old man announced on his return. "Though that Tyne drives hard bargains. Now about that," he said, pointing to the pile of treasures that Ewan had unearthed while was gone. "I'll work for it," Ewan said immediately, "whatever you need done." Shuel's grin was sly. "Happens I do have a delivery tonight. Could be a touch dangerous. You boys make it, you can take the lot." Act 11. The Dangerous Delivery. That evening, they pushed a covered cart through Riverside's darkening streets. Shul had given them simple instructions. Out the south gate, wait at the well in the hamlet down Fever's Hill, exchange cargo for payment, return. "Should have asked what we're delivering," Damien muttered. His curiosity got the better of him. Lifting a corner of the tarp, he peered inside and gasped. Crossbow bolts, hundreds of them, all shapes and sizes. "Cover it," George snapped, but the damage was done. They all knew now. They were smuggling weapons. The South Gate guard barely looked at them, more interested in the bribe Shul had given them to pass along. Soon they were in the countryside, following a rutted track to a deserted hamlet. They waited in the darkness beside an old well, nerves stretched taut. Every sound made them jump. Was that footsteps or just the wind? "Maybe they're not coming," Ewan whispered after 3 hours. "Maybe we should—" "Shh!" George held up a hand. "Someone's there." A figure emerged from the shadows, face hidden by a deep hood. "You have them?" "If you have payment," George responded, trying to sound confident. The figure gestured. 2 more men appeared, quickly unloading a small wagon. In exchange, they handed over a small box, surprisingly heavy. "Don't open it," the hooded man warned. "Don't drop it. And if you're smart, you won't look back." They didn't need the warning. As soon as the box was loaded, they headed back toward town. but they'd barely gone half a mile when George grabbed Ewan's arm. "We're being followed." Dark shapes paralleled them through the fields. Damien's heart hammered. "The gate will be locked by now. We're trapped." "Then we don't go to the gate," George decided, shouldering the box. "The river, we cross there," he said, pointing to a ford with a guideline running across. Act 12, Night Flight. The box was heavier than it looked. George struggled with it as they slipped down to the river, finding a shallow crossing point. The water was cold, reaching their waists, but they pressed on. Behind them, shouts indicated their pursuers had lost the trail. They didn't stop, pushing through undergrowth until they found a cluster of thick bushes to hide in. "What do you think is in it?" Ewan whispered, eyeing the box. "Gold, maybe," Damien suggested, "or silver." "Or something worse," George said darkly. "We're not opening it." By dawn, Ewan and Damien had made their way back to Tyne's camp. The repaired carts were waiting by the river. They found George hiding nearby, still clutching the box. Act 13. Return to the caravan. Shmuel was pleased when the boys returned early the next morning, though he asked no questions about their night. True to his word, he gave Ewan the 2 leather jacks and old greaves and added a request: deliver the box to a merchant in Bannock's lower city. The Golden Forge. Ask for Master Crow. He will see you, and your Carter friends are rewarded. Once they were all back together, Ego's relief was palpable. "What happened last night?" "Long story," George said tiredly. "We're here now." Dan pulled them aside later. "I overheard Tyne talking with his sons. There's more to this caravan than simple trading. Be careful." They rejoined the road and over the following days fell into the rhythm of travel. Ego and Ewan took turns driving carts, earning approving nods from Tyne. More carts joined them as they met up with Tyne's older brother Teeper, forming a proper caravan. But Teeper was a different sort than Tyne, colder, calculating. His eyes lingered on the boys, particularly on the valuable dogs.